Hello and welcome back to the Ideal Nutrition podcast. My name is Torwen and I'm joined today by my co-host Aidan. We've got a bit of a fun episode for you today where we will be sharing 10 underrated nutrition tips. Now we've actually written these tips quite separately, so hopefully we don't double up, but let's get straight into it.
So tip number one on my end is around creatine, as you could possibly guess, but although creatine is normally a chronic supplement, which is how we view it for muscle and everything like that, if you are ever sleep deprived, having a high dose of 20 to 25 grams has been found to have acute benefits for cognitive function. It's not something that you need to build up over time. You can literally do it. And the benefits typically peak after around 4 hours and they last for up to 9. So it is one of those ones where timing actually matters. Like you literally would just take it in the morning, like upon waking, and you would get these benefits. Obviously, I encourage everyone getting good sleep, but this is an easy win. And if you care about how much this matters, the research looking at this so far, because it's still early, has found 24.5% faster processing speeds. Clearly, there is some level of improvement there that is noticeable. And then the other benefit that a lot of people get is the placebo on top of that, because they're doing something that makes them feel better. But right now, that looks pretty promising.
Cool. My first one I wanted to start with because I think it's just a useful thing to know. So a 500 calorie deficit per day leads to around half a kilo weight loss per week. Now this is based on the fact that a kilo of body fat contains around 7,700 calories. So if we split that number across 7 days, theoretically supporting a kilo weight loss per week. If we halve that, then it's around half a kilo per week, which is around 500 calorie deficit per day. And it's a pretty good rate to aim for. I just think that's a useful nutrition fact to know if you're keen on manipulating body composition.
I found it so odd going through the university course that they never taught us that. I grew up reading bodybuilding.com and stuff like that and found it so interesting. I was like, damn, people would graduate without knowing this. And I've thought about it being why did they not teach us this? And one of the reasons they didn't teach us this is because that rule has some level of flaws. It kind of doesn't factor in that it makes the assumption that 100% of this loss comes from body fat, which has around 7,700 calories, and it doesn't come from anywhere else, kind of ignores water weight, so on and so forth, ignores changes in energy expenditure that do occur. But the deeper down the rabbit hole you go, as long as you're not a perfectionist, you can be like, oh, that rule's pretty good. And it is just off slightly. And what I would say is it underrepresents weight loss in the short term because there'll be water weight and stuff that makes it bigger than that, and slightly overrepresents it in the long term because once you factor in the changes in energy expenditure, that might slow things down a tiny bit. But it's way better than just not having any kind of guide. And I was like, damn, we would have people graduating our course that have no guide at all. Exactly.
It's a good one to know, I think, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I still think about it there are new grad dietitians who I do mentor who, I shouldn't be slandering people, but I don't know. I'm on a roll, I'll go. But they'll be putting people in a small calorie deficit with the hopes that it'll lead to a kilo of weight loss per week. I'm like, oh no, we mathematically can kind of figure this out. It's got to be bigger than that. Anyway, going on to the next tip. Out of character for me. So plant sterols for cholesterol. If you have high cholesterol, specifically high LDL cholesterol, I think plant sterols are one of the easiest wins in the world. I think there are very few things in this life where we can literally just take a supplement and get a noticeable improvement. But we can get that with plant sterols. And this applies whether it is genetic cholesterol, like familial hypercholesterolemia, or whether it's not. Because sometimes people will be like, oh, there's nothing I can do to solve this. But it still applies for familial hypercholesterolemia. The mechanism is simply that it reduces cholesterol absorption by the body. Totally safe. I've gone deep down the rabbit hole to be like, is there any downside to this? And you can find sections on the internet where people have theories about how it could. I've seen no evidence that actually has any downside. And you typically would see up to about a 10% reduction in cholesterol if it was high at the baseline within about 6 weeks.
I'm going to double piggyback off that one for one of mine and talk about Psyllium Husk being one of the best fiber supplements in terms of gut health, regulating bowel movements, things like that, but then also helping with cholesterol as well. So it's a soluble gel-forming fiber that can help improve constipation and diarrhea through that gel-forming property, making sure that you drink enough water, start with a low dose and build it up. But it also helps lower cholesterol by binding to bile acids, which are made from cholesterol, and they help in the digestion of dietary fats by binding to those and then having them excreted through the bowel rather than being reabsorbed back in the blood. So then your body, to make more bile acids, it has to use cholesterol from the blood, which in turn reduces cholesterol levels as well.
I'm somebody who cites my sources a lot. Like in our show notes, we'll often have this type of stuff. So if you ever want to check my stuff, you can. I've got one here that you can't really cite sources for, and that is vitamin C 3 times per day for if you have the common cold, likely improving the rate of recovery from that cold. The reason why I can't cite my sources is because it's not something that's really been researched. It's just, I don't want to say common sense, but it's just a bit of putting 2 and 2 together. Vitamin C has a short half-life of around 30 minutes to 2 hours in the plasma, which is what we care about it for this purpose. In other areas of the body, like the brain and adrenal glands, it could stay for like 10 to 40 days. That's less relevant for what I'm talking about. So much research on vitamin C is done on once-a-day supplementation, and it has been found to reduce the duration of people staying sick for with the common cold by about half a day on average. And they're just supplementing once a day. So we have evidence that vitamin C helps with this. What if you just had it in your plasma for a larger percentage of the day? What I would typically recommend is somewhere between 1 and 3 grams in each sitting, 3 times a day, just spread out relatively evenly. 3 grams is a risk. The downside for a lot of people is they might get diarrhea at the higher level. So it's like, just go conservative. Like we have evidence that lower dosages work. Just go with a serving size that like fits really well for you. You feel good, and it could help with this.
Something my grandma always told me, and you know what? I recovered from those colds quickly, so why not do something if it works? Cool. My next one is kind of an easy, underrated nutrition tip, but frozen fruit and vegetables are a lot cheaper than fresh. They're just as nutritious, if not more nutritious, because they are frozen at peak ripeness and they maintain this ripeness for a longer period of time. So if budget is something that you're concerned about, I think that's just a tip worth knowing.
One thing we did speak about off air was one of our tips. We did have one that did overlap, and this was about supplementing iron every second day. I'm curious what you had on this, but my tweak on this tip is going one step deeper. That is, I'm saying supplementing iron every second day is almost as good as daily. I do see, and this is actually something I've previously said, I've said it might even be better, and this is based around the logic that hepcidin is this thing that can decrease iron absorption that increases in response to high iron intakes. So the logic is if you supplement every day, hepcidin's high and is blocking that absorption. And there was a bit of research that made it seem like supplementing every second day could be better based on this. If you go deep down the rabbit hole on this one as well, you will find that if you just zoom out and you just look at studies that look at like levels of iron in the body after 3 months of doing it daily versus every second day, the people that do it daily still get slightly higher levels. But the reason why I bring it up to say it's almost as good is it means, one, if you miss a day, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, if anything, you get a bit of this extra benefit of improved absorption on the second day. But then the second thing I think is really relevant for is what I'd call a maintenance dosage. So like a lot of people go through this journey of they get deficient, they supplement, they get no longer deficient, they stop supplementing, they get deficient again, and they just repeat the cycle. I think there is a middle ground there where there's a bit of a maintenance dosage. And if you didn't know this about iron, you might contemplate that maybe the maintenance dosage is just like halving your intake and going from like once every day to once every second day. But if every second day is almost as good as daily, you actually could take this logic further and maybe supplement like twice a week, for example.
The little extra thing that I had there as well is in terms of gastrointestinal symptoms. So that is a huge thing to consider when taking iron supplementation, especially constipation. So if every second day is almost as good and it helps improve gastrointestinal symptoms, it's so much more likely that people aren't going to tap out and go, no, I'm so constipated, I can't continue this. And for me, that probably outweighs like that's a positive benefit as well.
Absolutely. And yeah, you can even go further with like, what is the line or what is the amount that you could take? So I was at a conference and they were talking about this concept of there's no point taking a low dose iron supplement because it won't address deficiency quickly. And I just found it a weird take because I'm like, well, surely there's something in between 0 and 105 milligrams of iron, which is like what a lot of proper iron supplements would contain. And the same kind of concept applies to like, if once every day is not tolerable and you do once every 2 days and say that's still not tolerable, could once every 3 days be? I don't know. I still think that some is better than none when it comes to this as well.
For sure. My next one then is that taking a multivitamin, if you have a low intake of fruit or veg or low diet variety, can help cover a general intake of micronutrients. Now, this works especially well for those with restricted diets, like I mentioned, whether it's strict food preferences or also textural sensitivities. Those are often people who miss out on a broad range of small micronutrients. It's worth knowing that a multivitamin can help cover those.
Cool. I like that. Have you got one more after me?
I do.
I've got one more. Okay, so I think this is underrated. I don't think this is interesting, but I think it's underrated. So my tip here is to prioritize leaner cuts of meat if you eat meat. I think that this is more important than probably the majority of the population, my own 2 cents. Stating the obvious, it's lower calorie. Stating, slightly less obvious, but maybe obvious to some, I don't know. It's slightly higher in protein because by definition, if you've got 100 grams of meat and it was lower in fat, it's got to be more of something else. Like it's how it ends up being higher protein, right? It dramatically reduces saturated fat intake, which can translate to better cholesterol, which can translate to reduced risk of cardiovascular disease as well. There's all of this data from like way back about how people on plant-based diets tend to live longer lives than people who are not plant-based. I think this is one of the things you can do that could dramatically improve your odds just by prioritizing like leaner cuts of meat. I think that matters if you are on an omnivorous diet. Sometimes people talk about fat being satiating. So they talk about choosing higher fat meats for that purpose. But if you choose leaner meat, you can eat more of it before you reach the same amount of calories. Like using regular mince versus extra lean beef mince, you can have almost double the amount of extra lean beef mince. That would be pretty filling too. And even if you didn't view the fat in meat as bad, that's fair enough. You can replace that fat with other sources. Like this is not me saying fat equals bad. Like I just think if you even viewed it as neutral, you could replace it with extra virgin olive oil, nuts, seeds, salmon, avocado, and other options that are clearly linked with positive health outcomes. So that's why I think this is an underrated one.
For sure. We've actually ordered this quite nicely because my last tip is also based around protein. So I think it's worth knowing that if your goal is muscle growth, certain amino acids are important. Ideally, having a complete range of amino acids is great. That is likely an animal-based or a whey-based protein, specifically looking at something like leucine to support muscle growth. In that tip then, collagen protein is possibly one of the worst protein sources for muscle growth, and just with everyone on social media promoting things like protein waters, which are often based on collagen peptides, it's worth knowing that if that's something that you're including, great for your skin health, hair health, nail health, but it probably won't support muscle growth.
Yeah. I'm going to add my own section because have we spoken about collagen for skin health together?
No.
I don't know if we have. I've probably spoken about it on the podcast. There is a bit of it goes back and forth, right? I am of the opinion that collagen is good for skin health, and I think that the research shows this. There is one meta-analysis that came out, I don't know, like 2 years ago, 1 year ago, I'm not really sure, and it kind of like concluded that the research is skewed by funding source and made it be like, oh no, you've all been tricked. Like the funding has made it look positive, and everything that's unfunded has made it not look positive, or not funded by like the industry or whatever. The oddest thing about it is if you actually just read every individual study, the studies that are not industry funded seem to be getting the same results as the studies that are industry funded. And it's like, if that, not even if that meta-analysis didn't exist, if the conclusion of the meta-analysis was not written that way, I don't think this would be a controversial topic. But now there's a lot of people out there like, I don't know, ripping on people on social media, acting as if they haven't read the research because they didn't realize it was skewed by industry funding. So I don't know, I'm just going to put my stance out there that at this stage, February 2026, which when we're recording, this will come out later, I believe collagen is good for skin health, although I don't overrate it in terms of, I don't think it makes a huge difference. I just think it makes a consistent, positive, small difference.
For sure. Well, this has been episode 247 of the Ideal Nutrition Podcast. As always, if you enjoy these type of episodes, let us know and we can do more. Bye.